The Sports Source is brought to you by Fast Frame, with exciting Vol sports prints now available.
Watching East Tennessee's first and only year-round sports talk show on television. This is The Sports Source with your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning and welcome into our annual Christmas episode, our Christmas extravaganza here on The Sports Source. 30 Vol questions, topics, awards. The questions and topics are real questions. We'll give you some real answers. They're just wrapped in Christmas form. Everything ties back to a Christmas movie, a Christmas song, a Christmas tradition, what have you. So let's just dive right into this thing. The first segment of our Christmas episode this year brought to you by Tennova Healthcare. And Tennova wishes you and yours a Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season, as do the folks on our panel today. We have Bob Hodge, we have Jimmy Himes, we have Chuck Cavaleris, who had a little medical work done. For anybody who thinks he was slugged in a fight somewhere, had a little medical work done this week?
Yeah, I had the little place frozen, which I, like you, encourage people and have helped so many people that you really need to have some of these places checked. And they froze it right off there.
There you go. All right. Gentlemen, as always, these questions are a little fun, hopefully a little fun. We try and break out big topics and real questions, but we wrap them in Christmas tidings. So the first one here, everybody gets about a minute, and I'm going to start quick questions. Bob Hodge, I think we got the graphic here, which Charles Dickens character is Butch Jones most like? Ebenezer Scrooge, who can still be saved, or Jacob Marley, who's as dead as a doornail?
I tell you what, I hate to do it on the week before Christmas, but I'm going to go, he's Jacob Marley. Because if you look at his schedule for next year,
which we will,
I don't see a way for Tennessee to be a lot better unless you catch that bit of magic. Maybe you've got a player we haven't seen before. Nobody had seen John Kelly before about Game 6, and he looks like a really, really good football player. So maybe you've got some more of these guys that we haven't seen very much of. But you lose your best defensive player, you lose your next best defensive player, you lose your next best defensive player after that, and so I don't see how your defense is better, and you lose Josh Dobbs. I just really don't see a way for him to get better, and I think that the ghosts are already out to get him.
Okay, so you say he's dead as a doornail, and that, my friends, is how our Christmas episode turns mean.
Like I said, Merry Christmas.
It turns mean every year. You might say the fire is slowly dying, but my dear, we're still goodbye in terms of Butch Jones. I think a lot of people are expecting that for next year. Jimmy, Travis Haney quoted an anonymous source a couple weeks ago who says the culture inside the UT football program is, quote, a disaster. How much are you buying that description? Or, as Scrooge put it, is there more of gravy than of grave about that quote? Is that just a little scare tactic, or do you believe it really is a disaster?
I don't think it's a disaster. It's probably not exactly where you want it to be, but I mean, this is a team that started out the year 5-0, was ranked in the top 10. It's a team that beat Florida. It's a team that beat Georgia. I do think there were some issues most of the season with Jalen Hurd. I think that was a concern. I thought when he quit the team, the culture, the attitude, the way they played was better. But when you lose to South Carolina and you lose to Vanderbilt, I think there's going to be a little bit of bickering internally. I also think the strength and conditioning coach situation was one that, look, I think Butch just made a mistake. When he fired Dave Clawson, it was Lawson.
Yeah.
When he fired Lawson, I think that was a mistake. And so they're going to go out and try to find somebody else. But to say a disaster, I wouldn't go that far. But I do think the culture toward the end of the year was not what you want it to be.
Sounded like a comment that was made when somebody was pretty raw. I bet if you asked whoever that is, I bet if you asked them today, it might not be worded the same way. That's pretty strong.
Unless it's the strength and conditioning coach.
unless you talk to somebody who was fired, and that would be pretty poor ethics to begin with. Chuck, would Butch Jones be in more or less trouble if Dave Hart were not a lame duck, or, as the Parkers called it in A Christmas Story, a Chinese turkey? And if you look at the little duck's head. It's Dave Hart. That's great. Tremendous Photoshop theater. Chuck Cavaliers, do you be in more trouble or worse or less trouble if Dave Hart weren't a lame duck right now?
Well, I think the situation helped, because who is going to make that decision? The athletic director. You didn't really have anybody in that chair, that would do that. So I think it helped the way the situation is, and I think Butch Jones was going to move forward anyway. I mean, he's under contract through 2020. You still had the university president situation too. Yeah. So you had other things, but I think the situation it is with Dave Hart helped Butch Jones.
The argument would be Dave Hart liked him, hired him, wasn't going to push him out anyway. He might have been able to help him get through some of this firefight when it's just him on his own. But I think most people would agree with you. Last one's for everybody kind of quickly here. We do this one here. This is one we repeat every year. Is the UT Athletic Department more or less fragile than it was last Christmas? You'd have to say less fragile. I mean, more fragile, wouldn't you?
More fragile.
More fragile.
I would.
Fragile, yeah.
I would go because you got the lame duck athletic director, obviously. But football was so disappointing, and I think it reverberates through everything else.
I agree with that. I think that the football situation is the one where that's the concern going forward. I mean, if Butch Jones has a bad year next year, is he going to be the coach the year after? Football is not as healthy right now as I thought it was, because I thought they'd win the East Division. I was wrong. So I think that's one of the concerns. And when you look at some of the other sports out there, I mean, Tennessee hadn't won a whole lot of SEC championships in any sports in the last 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, the one standby you could count on was Lady Vols basketball. And you really can't count on that now, it seems like.
All right. When we return, 7 more fast-paced questions, including my particular favorite gag of the day, which means it's really bad. So come on back on the Sports Source. We got 26 more topics to cover today. We'll see you on the other side of this break.